So I know we say all the time that conservatives are just mind-numbingly stupid, but that might not be the case. It could be that stupid people just naturally end up being conservative. When I say this, I don't mean it as an insult. Well, I do, but I'm not saying it as an insult. I'm saying this as an anatomical, biological fact. The structure of a conservative's brain physically makes them dumber. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I got the most perfect example of this that I've ever seen in my life the other day when a conservative woman posted this. This is a woman bragging about how liberals have smaller amygdalas than conservatives, and then she looked up the information and then let AI read it for her because, you know, she's stupid. And then she shared her findings bragging about how conservatives have a bigger amygdala. Since one of my degrees is in psychology, I loved this so much that I had to make a video about it. When we think about evolution, we often think that the strongest and the smartest and the fittest survive, but that's not really true because evolution doesn't give a shit if you're smart, fast, or strong. It just gives a shit if you can live long enough to fuck. And in this particular evolutionary story, humans did end up evolving higher orders of intelligence that allowed us to develop tools and practices that kept us safe and helped us to live longer and fuck more. But at a certain point, we got in a way too smart for our own good. And we engineered a very different environment than the environment we had evolved to thrive in. And at the very same time, we basically stopped the evolutionary process of natural selection. So our environment changed dramatically, and no longer were the dumb not suited to this new environment getting weeded out. A couple 100,000 years ago, when we were still living in caves in the woods and shit and fighting for our lives with lions and tigers and bears, oh my, it often paid off to be more emotional than intelligent. Because intelligence leads to critical thinking skills, and if I'm in the woods and I hear a twig break behind me, I would be like, oh, that's probably nothing, because 99% of the time, it's nothing. If you're out in the woods and you hear a twig break and you just instantly run away because you're terrified for your life, 99% of the time you ran away from nothing. But that 1% of the time, running away might have been the thing that saved your life. And that is all evolution gives a shit about. Now, the thing that makes you react either logically or emotionally to that twig breaking is your amygdala, just a little almond-shaped part of your brain. The bigger it is, the more emotional you are, the more poorly you process those emotions. So now flash forward a few 100,000 years, and all of those threats from us living out in the wild are pretty much non-existent. And now the problems we face as a species today require us to manage and understand our emotions so we can critically think about these existential problems. So no longer just running away from something because we're terrified or going all Hulk smash and violently reacting because we're angry, address the issues that we need to address effectively. Now, a good portion of our species has evolved to really thrive in this environment. That's why we have this environment. Those are the people who built it. These are the people who, instead of getting afraid and trying to pray the plague away by whipping themselves for being bad little boys, came up with medications. These are the people who, instead of sacrificing goats to get it to rain, you know, developed irrigation and learned meteorology. But these are also the people who eventually figured out how to save the idiots who weren't evolving along with the rest of us from killing themselves off. These are the doctors and nurses who saved you after you shoved too much horse dewormer up your ass because you didn't listen to the doctors and nurses about not shoving too much horse dewormer up your ass. But the research can lead us to believe that a group of our species is less evolved with a larger amygdala, leading them to be over-emotional, irrational, and less capable of critical thinking. And that group is called conservatives. And this is absolutely real. Multiple studies have been done on this over decades, comparing amygdala sizes, and people who claim to be conservative have larger ones. So to put this into perspective, you know how conservatives are always like talking about like hunter-gatherer type shit, like alpha male? Well, that's because that's as far as their brains have evolved. And so they're actually kind of like a bunny rabbit or a horse. A domesticated horse, for example, has never experienced any real external threats in its life. But it'll see a plastic bag or a shadow, or it'll hear itself fart, and it'll freak the fuck out. Because its brain has not evolved to be like, hey, I'm safe in the pasture. It still thinks that everything is always trying to kill it. And when you think about conservatives processing their emotions like an Arabian, the horse, not the people, all the stupid shit they say and do and believe makes so much more sense. They're just terrified of everything all the time because their brains have not evolved to process the environment in which they live. Trans people, immigrants, gay people, brown people, Muslims, solar panels, electric cars, science, everything that makes them uncomfortable because they don't understand it is their plastic bag blowing in the wind that they need to run away from and try to kick the shit out of in the process. That's it. They're just dumb fucking horses running away from plastic bags all the time. Every ideology, every belief, every policy that they support is based in fear. All of their bigotry is fear. Back to the horse analogy, horses, even in a pasture where they're protected, stick to a herd and freak out if they get away from that herd or if something else is introduced to that herd. Why? Because once upon a time there was safety in numbers and you were comfortable with the members of your in-group, with the members of your herd. But anything new, anything different could be a threat, could be dangerous. You reject that because you're afraid of it. That's why they're scared of immigrants and brown people and trans people and anybody who isn't exactly like them. Why do you think they're so obsessed with being the alpha lion, wolf, sheepdog that can protect their families from these imaginary threats they make up in their head? It's anxiety caused by an overactive amygdala that makes you think you need to be afraid of fucking everything. It's also where all of their insecurities come from. You want to know why all of these little incels and MAGA supporters are so fucking weird? It's because they have extreme anxiety about not being a part of the herd, a part of a group. You want to know what's funny is, you know how they always brag about how they have less mental health issues than liberals or progressives or leftists or communists or socialists or whatever the fuck they feel like calling you that day? That's not true either. They almost all have crippling levels of anxiety. Many suffer from depression and antisocial personality disorder and the whole gambit of mental illnesses. The thing about mental illness, though, is with the exception of extreme cases, to get diagnosed with those things, you need to go seek out help for them, and they are fucking scared to do that. In part because they're scared of doctors and really anybody who ever graduated from school, but they're also scared of what they would be told by those doctors, in this case being diagnosed with a mental illness, which is something that is a scary thing to do, and you have to have courage to do that, which is hard to do if you've got a giant fucking amygdala. So, well, yeah, most of these people are horrible racist douchebags who are holding society back and destroying the world as we know it. It's not their fault. It's just that they have inferior, less evolved little pony brains. But there's good news there, Spirit. It's not like you're a different species, even though it feels like that sometimes. Even with that giant amygdala that makes you so emotional and moody, you still have enough brain power to tell it to shut the fuck up. And I get that that's not necessarily easy, but that's okay. There's help available. Go see a therapist. They will help you find methods to tell it to shut the fuck up. And then you won't be so goddamn insufferable, and the possibilities are limitless. You could get invited back to Thanksgiving. You could find a friend group that isn't based around worshiping a geriatric orange blob doing a shitty Jabba the Hutt impression. You might even find a girl to touch your pee-pee. All it takes is just a tiny little bit of bravery and probably a fair amount of medication.